Oh, that ended abruptly. Sorry about that. Bang, here we are.
It's our new intro. It's a new season. Here we are.
Oh, it's our new
Welcome to season 2.
Totally didn't work. That's awesome.
Fall off the end of the cliff with getting to Unstuck. Hey, Tim.
We're getting unstuck one trip up at a time. Welcome back. It is season 2 and talk about coming in with a bang. How exciting. We in season 1, we had 40 episodes, which is really amazing. And so it is a pleasure for us to kind of literally be from one side of the globe to the other today in our conversation. We're excited today to be talking about why changing your mind is scary. And Colin is about to introduce our guest, but this is just a thought for you if you are listening to us for the first time, or if you're tuning back in, ready to join us in season 2. We recognize that many times change comes. Oftentimes it'll come without our permission, but sometimes we also feel the inkling that something has to change. But there are things that get in the way of that. We actually are the ones that get in the way for ourselves. And so that's why we feel it's really pertinent and really timely that we have Tim as a guest today, because Tim's story and his journey has been one of giving himself permission to change his mind and about who he is and what he wants to create. So without further ado, Colin, why don't you introduce our guest, Tim, today?
Sure.
Welcome, Tim.
Sure. So Tim is a fellow coach colleague of ours from the other side of the world in South Africa, coming from South Africa today. I have known Tim for at least 6 years, I think, Tim, probably 2017, wow, 2018. It's been a while. And the wonderful thing about Tim is that he has this innate ability to see past your bullshit and ask the unexpected. So I think it's great that he's here on this first episode of Getting to Unstuck for season 2, because we are looking at reimagining leadership and reimagining leadership development and reimagining coaching. And I think it's perfect to have somebody kick off the season who asks the unexpected, who takes you on a journey where you did not think you would go. So that's Tim, and he'll tell us more when he tells us a little bit about himself. But that's his magic secret sauce, to go where you didn't think you were going.
I have had that experience as well with Tim, and I have to say it's an honor to have you here, because I think that you're going to offer us some insights, as you did in our brief conversation. Anytime I get a chance to talk with you, I walk away with something that it was, as Colin said, unexpected and provocative. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. So Tim, why can you help us understand a little bit about how you're sitting, how you ended up sitting in this chair? It's this afternoon your time. It's this morning for us. Tell us a little bit about the journey that you've been on, and why you really feel like not why you
it's
feel.
okay to change.
Why it's okay to change your mind. Yeah, but let's just get started. We just love to hear about your journey first, so people can understand why you're here today.
Thank you for asking that question and having me here. So I'm Tim. I'm a coach. I think online I call myself a consciousness coach, but I'm not sure that fully encapsulates everything I do. How did I get here? Well, I was born. That was the beginning in 1977, and I grew up in a privileged upbringing. My brothers went to Oxford. They were a little bit older than me. I knew I had a gift, but I didn't know what that gift was, and I started to create this black sheep persona. I was very good at being naughty. I'm still fairly good at being naughty. I just do it in a way that nourishes me now rather than destroys my life. And the black sheep was really because I misunderstood the gift as being creating separateness, when actually it was about moving towards. And so I created this separateness for many years, actually, as I believe so many people do, which is why I think so many people find it hard to change, which I'm sure we'll get into. To fast track my story, because there's a lot. I went to university. I did a good degree I wasn't particularly interested in, business and IT. Worked in the city for 5 years in corporate tech. Went to rehab for drug addiction. I was like your classic city boy, BMW suit. I wasn't very nice to myself or to other people, and I did a lot of drugs and made a lot of money. That's a good description. So I got sober in 2005, and I wanted to be a therapist and a coach then, but I didn't really want to go back and study. I didn't want to go back to university, and so I became a fitness trainer. I wanted to be of service to others. Spent 15 years as a fitness trainer and life coach, and working with people like Amy Winehouse, the Rolling Stones, royals, presidential families, right through to people like yourselves, right? And through that career, I really learned that, it didn't matter if you had the body, it didn't matter if, I worked with supermodels, billionaires, royals, I guess people who society says, well, when you have that, when you look like that, when you have that, then you're happy. They weren't, they weren't happy. And it didn't really matter whatever they got, it was never enough. So my fitness career led me to a place where I had exactly the same life, a very successful life on the outside, but inwardly lost, disconnected, incapable of being intimate with other people. And so in 2012, having been sober for 7 years, I relapsed back into drug addiction because I thought, well, let me just break everything and then I'll figure out how to rebuild. Last week, I celebrated 10 years sober this time, which is something I've never achieved before. So change is absolutely possible.
Congratulations. Yeah.
And when I got sober this time, I really believed that I had to do things differently. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the business. It wasn't about the flat I bought in London, the external stuff. This is an inner game. This is an inward journey. And so I made a commitment to myself to rebuild my life consciously, which is what led me to do what I do now. So yeah, that's kind of a very short synopsis as to where it began and where I am now.
Thank you. One of the things that you said about being a black sheep, it resonates a lot with a number of people that we coach, because the other side of that is a longing to belong. And so what do you think? Is it belonging that drives us a great deal? What's your experience of that?
It's a really good question. I really feel like we're all, Ram Dass has a beautiful quote which says we're all just walking each other home.
Yes.
And I really think that that's what we all seek, is connection, is belonging, it's intimacy, it's the connection with your partner or your colleagues or whoever it is, but it's deep, intimate connection. And I think ultimately that's what we all seek, because if you don't have that, it doesn't matter how much you put out there, you won't feel it. Right? And we're here to live from our heart. We're here to live from a foundation of divine love. That's our natural state of being. All the other stuff is insignificant. A hearse doesn't, someone told me this a few weeks ago, a hearse doesn't have a crowbar. Right? You can't take your stuff with you.
Good point. Yeah. Thought about it that way.
I heard, like, when you were talking before, I heard this, that pursuit that you were in, right? And I totally resonate with that too, because I've done the pursuit and had the cars and the stuff and all that, everything that went along with it. What do you think it is in today's world, and especially for leaders and no, actually for everybody that's in the workforce and workspace? What do you think is missing between pursuit to this like destination, going and going and going, and this idea of belonging that you were just speaking about. Like, what's the disconnect, I guess, is my trying to articulate a question. I'm intimidated because I have all these great coaches around me and I can't find the words. Anyway.
You're trying to ask a smart question.
Totally. Sorry, I just pressed the button. Technical. I was trying to ask a smart question, but I think you got it. You know me well enough.
Right. Yeah. So let me use this analogy as a story because it's one that is very close to my heart, particularly with my sobriety last week. So when I went into rehab, there were 2 beds in my room and the other bed was spare. And then a few days later, this guy came in and he was a very successful millionaire, wife, and everything that goes with that. Got into alcoholism and ended up losing everything, and he was homeless for 8 years. And so when he came in, that night I was going to sleep and I was like getting myself in my bed, and I noticed that he was preparing to sleep on the floor next to his bed. Now, he didn't use a duvet because the duvet was too uncomfortable. He didn't use a pillow because he never had a pillow when he was homeless. He used his hand. And he didn't take the duvet, he took the blanket that was on top of the duvet because it was familiar to him, that was comfortable. Now, I witnessed watching him trying out the bed, moving back to the floor. Some nights he would go to sleep in the bed, and when I wake up in the morning, he was asleep on the floor. And I spoke to him about it, and he said, Tim, I'm trying the bed, but it's just too uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I think you know where I'm going with this.
Yes.
Right? And so the issue we have here is that many people build their lives through the perception of their mind, through the conditioning, right? God bless mum and dad, but they weren't awakened, at least mine weren't, right? And so we begin to get programmed. Our minds start to pick up all sorts of narratives about who we think we need to be in order to live in this world. And so we present this version of ourselves. Right?
Yes.
Then when we see change, we can only see change through that perceived version of who we think we need to be. So it's not you that's perceiving the change, it's the perceived version of who you think you are. Which is why so many people find it difficult.
Yeah.
The other side of it, with regards to seeking this intimacy, seeking love, seeking connection, is that whilst the bed is incredibly comfortable, it's not. Maybe it's too much. The reality is, and as coaches we see it all the time, the reality is that we know that there's a really, really delicious, comfortable bed life available for you where you can receive all the love, all the intimacy. You can receive all of it.
Yeah.
But it's too uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think the issue with people with regards to change is the uncomfortability is that they are trying to put themselves or a version of themselves in that bed, and there is a disconnect. Because as Colin and Carol said, when you really get into this and you start to move inwards, you'll recognize that this version of you, your highest self, if you want to call it, is so far away from your current reality. It's impossible to put yourself in that bed. And so the issue here comes down to it's trusting the surrender. It's trusting the trust of the present moment, allowing yourself to surrender. Like I really believe, and I will talk for a long time, so please interrupt me. But I really believe, particularly in the coaching space, people say to me, what do I get? I'm like, that's the wrong question you should be asking. I don't want to tell you what you're going to get. Because I'm here to explore the limitless, infinite deliciousness of you inside. If you want me to tell you what you're going to get, then what we're going to do is we're going to go on a journey of the mind and a version of you. And it might look better and feel better. But it doesn't come back to the heart, which is what we all seek.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I agree. It's that seeking that often we see as coaches, people are going through over and over and over again with the same results.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So something happened for you in your second choice for sobriety. Was there an incident that occurred that had you say, I'm ready?
I don't know is the answer. I don't know what occurred, but I do know that on the 26th of August 2014, and I feel emotional about this because that was the day when I stopped. It was a day when I said, I'm ready, I'm clear, I'm ready, I'm good to go. Now, I'd been to rehab before and came out and relapsed and said I was going to stop, but deep down, I knew that it wasn't my time. But on the 26th of August, I was ready. And I remember messaging my mum and dad and saying, I'm done. And that was it. That was it. Divine intervention, or is that me having the insight that whilst I know I have no idea how good it can be, I know it can be better than this. And so I'm up for that.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's it. It's just putting one foot in front of the other. What's the next right thing to do? I mean, so I received a very clear message within me that said, it's time now, Tim.
I think of a term that people will often say offhanded. Often it's when they talk about voting or politics, but that's not what this is about. Where there's a phrase like "better the devil you know." So people, we find comfort in the familiar, even if the familiar is not comfortable. There's a comfort in the familiarity itself, because we are such meaning-making machines and beings that we'll attach meaning to that, even if it's not serving us. And it's interesting to think about, the questions of, sometimes it really is scary. We're so comfortable with limitations. We're so comfortable with the things that aren't working, that the idea of thinking about, but what does it feel like, or what would it look like for things to actually work out? What would it feel like? And I can't remember the phrase that you just used, but basically that, that there is better. What does better feel like? And sometimes this being able to grasp that is such a big jump from being miserable, but better the devil you know, better that because I know how to function in this. I know how to function in disappointment. I know how to function in, in the context of a lot of the people that we coach in whole human coaching. I know how to function in kind of like a toxic workplace, or things that are not, so the leap from this to being like what's possible, there's that liminal space that is very difficult for people to, because they think that I'm going to need to flip completely to this, rather than easing themselves into the idea of what does better feel like? What does better look like? So I'm curious, do you, just even on your journey into sobriety, how did you, like, when you look back on that now, what were some of the indications for you that you were able to give yourself permission to change?
I think it really went, I had to really look carefully at my life, because, I was doing all the things. I was going to Alcoholics Anonymous and, working a program, and I had built a very successful business in sobriety, and had the money and all of that. So I was like, well, it's not that, Tim. So what is it? And it came back to this calling when I first got sober, which was, I need to be doing what I'm doing now. And so I really, on reflection, I had created this kind of monastic, sober Tim,
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
And it just, life was nice, but it wasn't me. I wasn't being me. I'd created a 1 degree separation from myself and the rest of the world. So the reality was, well, I created a really lovely life. What am I going to create if I'm me? If I let it.
Yes, that's it.
If I let it all out.
Yes.
If I put a different fuel in the tank, right? So many people, they use this fuel from the traumas of the past to propel themselves into a place of high performance.
Yes.
You know, I see it with a lot of high performing execs using fear. Either their parents were poor or their parents were very successful. But typically the fuel in the tank is, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to go back there. It's not a healthy fuel. You've got to change the fuel in the tank.
Yes.
Because that fuel in the tank will always give you a version of what it was.
Yeah.
So you've got to take that. It's looking backwards. It's pushing you. It's always pushing you forwards, and so you'll never get there. It just feels like, I don't know if you've ever laughed so much when you're running, you almost feel like you're falling over, and if you stop, you're gonna, right? The only thing is, you're not laughing. You're actually suffering. You're in pain. You're using the traumas of the past to propel you forward. So what about considering this divine energy that's within you, the oneness of who you are, to drive you into a place? What would that look like?
Really nice.
And I think for many people, they can't see themselves in the comfortable bed, and they definitely don't know how to be in that life using the fuel that they're currently seeing now, and so they believe that their entire life is going to fall apart. And for some people, it's absolutely necessary. They need to leave the job, the wife, the husband, or the wives and the husbands, or whoever it is. That's the deal.
Yeah,
I love that. I use that analogy a lot of the fuel tank, right? And how much energy are you expending on the mask and the falsehood of the story you're telling yourself, and how much energy are those stories telling you? And what would happen if you could become untethered from those stories, right? What are the unlimited possibilities if you had the fuel that wasn't, jamming you into reverse as opposed to moving you forward?
Yeah,
love it.
Yeah, who would you be? Who would you be if you were being yourself? If you weren't people, if you weren't people pleasing, who would you be if you were leading from a place of truth and authenticity and fearlessness?
Billy Joel has a line in one of his songs. It's The Big Man on Mulberry Street, which is, "What if nobody finds out who I am?" And I think we all suffer from that because we've put so many layers in front of us that we know, as you did, who you were at your core. But it took a lot to get that openness to allow the world to see who you were. And for you to be able to live into that. So we support people a lot in taking small steps towards something. And you've spoken of how it can be a decision that happens right away. What do you think about the idea about taking steps towards a big change?
Me personally, I'm not very good at taking small steps. I'm like big. I've always been big or go home. That's just the way I operate. And I share that because I also think that's important. We must be who we're going to be in the direction that we're taking. If that means you always play big, then that's the game you've got to play. And if you're trying to play small, maybe it's getting in the way. But of course, there are times where I feel a bit like a rabbit in the headlights, and I'm not quite sure what to do. And so there are two questions that in those situations that I will ask myself. One is, what would love do? The second question is, what's the next right thing to do? And it's so simple, because with change, as you said, Carol, we can get caught up in it. We can get ourselves a few steps ahead, and that's when the noise comes in of, well, that's not going to work. So sometimes it really is like, literally, can I do this for the next minute? There's a beautiful saying in Alcoholics Anonymous, just for today. The thought of not drinking for the rest of your life, or whatever your drug of choice is very daunting. But just for today, it's like, yeah, I can do that.
Yes.
Abraham Hicks calls that the 17 seconds, right? Can you hold that? Can you hold yourself in that space for 17 seconds to help just, you're not, you know, it's like if a train is going so fast, it's not going to, like, even if it slams on the brakes, it's still skidding. It's not like, you know, the only thing that does that, I think, is a squirrel. Like squirrels will run and stop dead like that. But other than a squirrel, nothing else does that. So there's like that, what can I do that's going to lean into the solution, lean into where I want to go, rather than being propelled anymore, letting go of the propulsion and the compulsion of what's behind me. I love what you're saying about that. I also find it very interesting that everything that we are talking about comes back to the stories that we tell ourselves, right? Like there's like narratives, and Colin used a phrase, and I've loved it ever since I heard him use it. He calls it an accounting of the stories. And we talk about that in our coaching, that we give almost like a ledger, like an accounting of the stories that we're telling ourselves, and how those are those what, like you were saying, are those what we're using for fuel? And because those stories are so powerful, probably one of the big questions that I hear coming through this is like, who am I without this? Like, we're so used to being bogged down and weighted down by the trauma or the mistakes or the self, whatever that we put on ourselves. Who am I without this? And sometimes we don't even, it can feel very foggy for people to even imagine a different future, right? Maybe that's why it feels scary, is because it's unclear. So I'm curious, what would be, when you're talking, if you were with someone right now and having that conversation, what are some of the questions that you would ask them if they were coming up against that?
Coming up against what?
The inability to be able to envision the change.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people, again, this is where it gets complicated, because I don't know what they're perceiving that change through. Is it the perception through their mind that is limited, or there are limited aspects of it, or are they perceiving it through the divine self? And most of my work is about bringing people back to the authentic self, and then making decisions, from there. If someone can't envisage it, then I would probably get to take them back to a time where life was really delicious and lovely. And I would use that as an experience to give them an opportunity to hold on to that experience in the present moment, because that's all there is. The present moment is now. It's the most magical moment that there is, and the more we can lean into it, the more we can experience the oneness of it. So I totally agree. Sometimes it's really difficult to see it, to envisage it. In which case, I would probably let go of that and focus more on presence. Who can you be now? You know, yesterday I was talking to a client about the non-attachment to money, which is a big one. We were talking about, she just couldn't imagine not thinking about money for the rest of the month. Of course not. I mean, you know, she's been around for a few decades, and she's been practicing worrying and thinking about money all her life. And right, so it takes practice. Just like getting fit, right? Consistency. Can you do this for the next minute? Can you not think about or worry about or whatever it is for the next minute?
That's interesting. I love how you say practicing that for the rest of your life, because you think life is kind of automatic, or you do this and you make decisions. But I love that analogy of practicing worrying or practicing thinking for your whole life. It's a good way of putting it.
We have been, when we think about it. We build those habits so early, and we get into that rhythm, that rut of how it is supposed to be in our head. And that new thought, that's the interesting thing that's coming up for me, Tim, is that new thought becomes just a bit disruptive. And so and like anything disruptive, we worry it a bit, and that causes it to, I don't know. I think the positive aspect of it is that we're worrying a new thought. It's like, oh, there's something new and shiny here, to think about it. And I love that, because it comes into our day-to-day existence. because that's when change actually begins to
Mhm.
build some momentum, is when we can do it more and more and more.
Mm. Mm. And it like everything takes practice. No one gets on a bike. No one gets on a bike when they're a child and starts doing wheelies down the road.
No.
They get on a bike, they fall off, they hurt themselves, they cry, they get back on, and eventually it becomes like riding a bike. Same deal with this. Same deal with all new patterns of behaviour. You know, I kind of describe it as South Africa are playing New Zealand this weekend, so there's like a lot of hype. And you know, if you can imagine like someone kicking the penalty in rugby, you know, it's the World Cup final. This is the last second. They either get it and win or they don't. Right? And there's 80,000 people in the stadium.
Yes.
And then the 80,000 people, imagine that's your mind, because we have around 80,000 thoughts a day. Right? So that's the noise of your mind coming in.
Yeah.
Right? And then you've got millions and millions and millions of people watching the game on the TV. That's the conditioning. That's societal programming, generational trauma. So you've got a lot of noise going on when you're trying to be present. Now that, in an example, all they need to do is kick the ball. That's all they need to do, right? Now their effectiveness of kicking that ball is directly proportional to how much noise they're willing to let in. And it's the same deal with us. It's the thinking about the thinking that gets us into trouble. All thoughts are just innocent thoughts, and they only become powerful when we start thinking about them.
Yeah.
So important.
I'm going to use that one analogy. I like that one.
That's good. It's really good.
If you don't mind.
I probably stole it from somewhere.
We shamelessly poach. It's good.
That's great.
Feel like an artist.
Exactly.
But I have a question though. So kind of going back to leadership, right? Or the workplace and the workforce. Why aren't we allowing people to fall off their bike? Like it feels like when you come into the workplace, you got to stay on your bike and you can't fall down. And we've been playing around with the performance review as well, like the concept of it and how can you reimagine it, because it's so stuck. Well, back to your sports analogy, it's so stuck in kind of a performative sports past. But how can we let people fall down on their bike in the office, in the workplace, in the workspace?
I think the question would be, why wouldn't you? If that is, you know, everything, there is no good or bad. Everything is. Right? My partner, Lisa, was like the sickest I've ever seen her in 5 years. She was a woman down, flu, couldn't even like look at her phone. And so I was looking after her, doing what I do in my life, and then Gemma, my stepdaughter. Right now, I'm grateful to her for being that sick. Why? Because I got to spend more time with Gemma, my stepdaughter, who would normally go to her mum. And so our relationship deepened. And I thanked Lisa for being so sick. Right now, I'm not sure if there's any example where something has been challenging or hard or horrific, and then the other side of it, there's a consequence, but that consequence creates light. The sun rises, the sun sets. So this thing with challenge and feeling challenged, and like you said, Colin, letting people fall off the bike. You know, if you want joy, you've got to celebrate the challenging times as well. You know, otherwise it's just being a joyist, and that sounds a bit boring. Like the idea of heaven sounds horrific.
I know.
Everything's perfect all the time. You know,
what are you gonna
fuck
do?
that shit.
So this just came to me. Roller coasters, perfect example. Right? What's the necessary part of a roller coaster? It needs to be really scary. If it's not scary, no one gets on the roller coaster. So it's part of it.
This is
Yin and yang.
such a great way for us to challenge leaders. Who did you let fail today? How did you celebrate what didn't work? Because we don't do that nearly enough.
No.
That's the whole idea of that performance evaluation, is we're only looking at what's working. We want to celebrate what's working, and that's all good. But I am taking something different away, Tim. Challenging leaders.
I also think if we don't allow people to be challenged or celebrate challenge or lean into challenge, then they create this perception, and the wheels come off anyway. It all
Yeah.
comes out, but then normally the wheels come off monumentally. It doesn't have to be that way. I don't think it has to be that way moving forwards if we lean into the challenge. You know, can I share a little story with you? Do I have time?
Sure. Yes.
Yeah, of course.
So imagine you've got this box, this wooden box, and there's thousands and thousands of precious stones in this box. Beautiful precious stones. All of them are like 10 out of 10. They're all beautiful. Right now you've got this necklace, this beautiful silver necklace, and it can only fit 100 stones on the necklace. So that means you've got to start going through the box, and you've got to start to select your first stone. And that means you have to say no to thousands of beautiful stones. So then you put this first stone on, and on and on and on and on and on. You have to repeat that process over and over and over again. Now see the no's as the challenges. All those stones that you're saying no's to, those are all the challenges in your life. Now what we do as society or in leadership or whatever it is, we wait, we celebrate the necklace, this beautiful necklace, right? But the challenge is, you know, even digging up the precious stones in order to get there, all of the entire process, and each one of those stones is as important as the next one. Each one of those should be celebrated as much as the ones that we're saying no to. And when you can start operating life like that, then you'll never have to wait for this beautiful thing to occur, because everything becomes extraordinary. Everything becomes like the celebration of the, you know, the paycheck or the money or whatever it is. And you start to enter into this beautiful experience with life where everything becomes beautiful. Doesn't mean that it's easy.
Yeah.
But you look at challenges in a way, it's like, what can I create from this space?
Yeah. And how do we define beauty, right? That beauty is just like how beauty, how we find beauty in people or scenery is different for each person. Beautiful is what we decide it's going to be to us.
Yes. Yeah, we do it in relationships. Right. There's sometimes in my head, you know, over the years, I'll have definitely picked things up, or I don't like that about her, and this and this and this. I'm not, you know, but the truth is that if those little characteristics weren't part of my partner, it wouldn't be who she is. And I love all of her. I love all of her. That's what it's about.
Yeah.
Yes.
I wonder if she's listening. She's going to ask me, what bits?
What exactly?
Please.
I thought I was perfect. But the same goes for me. I'm not perfect. You know? I don't want to be perfect, but I want to be. I want to celebrate all that I am.
Crystal, you put it that everything belongs.
Everything belongs. That's a Richard Rohr. I got that from Richard Rohr. And by telling myself that's like a regular mantra or affirmation that I tell myself, everything belongs. It just, I feel like my whole nervous system relax when I think about it, that I don't have to be putting all my eggs in this basket or whatever. Everything belongs. This all belongs in the experience, my human experience. I'm a being of light that's having a human experience right now in time, and everything belongs in this moment. Well, Tim, this has been a fantastic, truly has been a really great conversation. I trusted Colin and Carol's recommendation, and I now know why they wanted to have this conversation with you.
Thank you.
So thank you. Thank you for showing up with us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, sir. Good to see you.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
And,
thank you.
I'm going to press the correct outro button soon.
Yeah, correct outro button in a second. And just tell us where do people find you, and how can they interact with you?
So you can find me on timhayes.com, my website, or Instagram timhayes.coach.
.coach. Okay, perfect.
Or they can ask you.
Or they can ask us. Fantastic. All right. And for those of you who are still here listening, thank you for joining us. You are the reason that we do this. And so we're grateful that you've taken time, whether it's you just have us in your headphones while you're doing something else, or whether you've sat down and had a coffee with us during this time. Thanks for joining us. If you've enjoyed this show, We've got a lot more great things coming in season 2, but we also have a lot of great episodes that we had in season 1. So please like and subscribe anywhere you listen or watch great podcasts. And until the next time, we are enjoying the journey of getting to Unstuck with you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, everybody. Bye-bye.